Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to Night School. That's right. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold Night School. We break down the deepest conversations, the most intense debates, the most complicated ideas going on in the world today. And I know I look a little different. I'm on the road right now. So I got a little echo. I know it ain't the perfect background, but I did not want to miss an opportunity today to talk to you all about what is going on in the world, and some stuff has happened tonight that we got to get into. Let's start right away with the Supreme Court. That's right. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling. This is no small thing, y'all. I mean, a landmark ruling that will dramatically change the way we do business in this country, the way we manage the environment, the way we talk about healthcare regulation. We have effectively undermined the federal government's ability to engage in regulatory actions. Let me be very specific and very clear. There was a ruling back in 1984, known as the Chevron decision, or known as Chevron. It is Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council. Back then in 1984, by a vote of 6-3, the Supreme Court basically said that if there is an issue that Congress has not directly addressed, i.e., that means the law hasn't directly made this plain and clear, the federal government and federal agencies have the power to interpret the statute as long as it's reasonable. So, in other words, if there is a dispute about what clean air means, or if there's a dispute about what a reasonable distance is, or there's a dispute about what a healthy person might be. I'm sort of pulling some things out here, but the idea here is that if there's an ambiguous law, if there's something that's unclear, that federal agencies have the ability to, and the right and the power to make a decision about that. Now, that has been doctrine, we call the Chevron doctrine, for more than 40 years. The Supreme Court has stood strong and tall on this principle. And the reason they've done that is because they believe, crazy enough, that we should appeal to expertise. That if there is a debate about how to interpret an educational policy, the Department of Education should deal with it. If there's a question about environmental issues, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, should deal with it. This was a very basic, reasonable, logical interpretation of how power should work between federal agencies versus the courts. But now, today, the Roberts Court has made its own interpretation. They have basically overturned and undone 40 years of legal doctrine. They've now ruled 6-3. You'll be shocked to know this was along ideological lines. The conservatives voted one way, the liberals voted the other way. They voted that the courts should make the determination, not the federal agencies. Whew. Now, what's interesting about the fact that the conservatives made this decision, the fact that the conservatives made this move, is that back in the day, the decision was applauded by conservatives. Back in 1984, the Chevron decision actually was used to uphold the Reagan administration. You know how conservative Reagan was, the Reagan administration's EPA, which made an interpretation about the Clean Air Act that actually made it easier to not regulate carbon emissions. In other words, there was a decision about, again, how much the environment should be regulated with regards to emissions. And they said, well, let's not ask the court, let's ask the Environmental Protection Agency. And in that case, it actually supported the conservatives' argument because it was Reagan's EPA. He had a bunch of people there that didn't care about the environment. But over time, conservatives have looked at this ruling and said, you know what? We don't want this much government. We don't want this much regulation. And so even the Roberts decision earlier today, they acknowledged that this used to be a conservative darling, But they said, not anymore. This has become unworkable. This doesn't make sense anymore. We can't work with this kind of a doctrine. And so it just doesn't make sense to us. And as a result, we're overturning it. And we're saying that the courts have the power to make these determinations. What a strange thing to do. Intellectually, it doesn't make sense. You're saying that effectively, the people who know the most about the environment, the EPA, shouldn't make the decision. Some random person, or not random, but a judge should make that determination. You're saying that the person who's the most about housing or transportation or education or healthcare shouldn't make the determination about those issues. A judge on a bench who doesn't have technical knowledge, who doesn't have expert knowledge, who doesn't have experience in that field, that they should somehow be the decider. That doesn't make sense. But it does make sense when you look at the fact that the Republican movement, the conservative movement, the right in general, has effectively tried to shave away all forms of federal oversight. Donald Trump just said the other night he wants to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. They don't want anything but a Department of Defense. They want to go to war. They want to manage the economy. They want to make sure billionaires are protected. And they want everything else to go to states. They want everything else to go to courts. And the fact that the Roberts Court is doing this is just another reminder of this court's legacy. The Roberts Court legacy, the Roberts Court's legacy will be stripping away women's rights, stripping away reproductive freedom, undoing all of the advances of the last 50 to 60 years, from affirmative action to Roe v. Wade, and now taking away the ability for the federal government to regulate things that should be regulated. We're not talking about regulating minor things. We're not talking about regulating a micromanaged individual citizen's life. It's not the conservative panic that, oh my God, they're going to be in our bedrooms, in our bathrooms, in our kitchens, in our wallets. No, this is saying if there's an oil spill and we don't have a clear law, the Environmental Protection Agency should decide how to proceed if there's a dispute. This makes complete sense, unless you have an agenda that goes beyond justice. If you have an agenda that goes beyond common sense, you have an agenda that goes beyond what works, because we got 40 years of legal doctrine that shows that it works. And it's only this court that has said we got to do something different. So no longer will lower courts defer to federal agencies when things aren't crystal clear. Now, it's a mess. Now it's a mess. And courts that are deeply ideological, that are not following the principles that should be guiding them, instead, are going to be activist judges in all the ways that Republicans said they hate. But now that the activism is happening in a way that enhances and advances their mission and their values and undermines liberal or radical or progressive values, now all of a sudden they about that action. It is ridiculous. And it's also a reminder, I got to say this, y'all, and I know my third party brethren, and I'm a third party person, I'm a Green Party member. This is why it's important for us to think about, really think about what we're doing in this upcoming election. We have to think about closely and deeply what kind of outcome we want to have in November. Because if a Trump court becomes fortified because Trump gets reelected and he puts another judge on the bench, another Supreme Court judge on the bench, we may never see a liberal or even progressive or even non-fascist Supreme Court in our lifetime. We got to do something. And it means doing everything we can to ensure that Donald Trump is not the president in 2024. It is really that simple. How do you do that when Joe Biden gives the worst debate performance in modern history? Even Richard Nixon in 1960, he looked sweaty, he looked nasty. He looked unattractive to people, but he still was coherent and articulate and advanced his narrative. I've never seen in modern history a debate performance as bad as the one that Joe Biden engaged in last night against Donald Trump in the first 2024 presidential debate. Donald Trump destroyed Joe Biden. So what should Democrats do? Well, first we have to assess the damage done, because you can have a bad debate performance and it's fine, right? You have a bad night, you keep moving. And if you're a Democrat, that might be your best bet. You don't have a bench. Biden ain't going nowhere. You're weeks, not years from your convention. You don't have a vice president who is polling so high that he could just step aside and keep the momentum going. None of that is the case. So Biden seems like he is the heir, not the heir apparent. Biden seems like he's the only choice. Biden seems like he is the only choice. But I'm gonna tell you something. If Biden is your choice, you lose. If Biden is your choice, Donald Trump will be the next president, unless there's a new scandal, unless there's some rabbit that they pull out of their hat, unless Donald Trump is literally in jail. I don't see anything that says right now that Joe Biden can defeat Donald Trump. Because the biggest fear that people had was that Joe Biden couldn't do the job moving forward. Yeah, there are people who ideologically don't agree with Biden, but ultimately they know he's a manager, he's a leader, he's capable. They know, the trains will run on time with him as president. There are people who don't have a deep investment in MAGA Republicanism. They don't have a deep investment in liberal progressivism or liberal Democrat life. They don't care if Trump is racist or not. They don't care if Biden is a warmonger or not. Their point is, I want to make sure my taxes are low. I want to make sure that my roads are paved. I want to make sure that my life doesn't change. And so they're going to pick the person that does best for them. And if they see Joe Biden looking like he did last night, not having incoherent sentences and thoughts, and looking like he was way past his bedtime at 9 o'clock, if people feel that way, they're not going to choose him. So you can ride with Biden and say, look, we don't have a choice, but then you're conceding the next 4 years of Donald Trump. Now, if you concede the next 4 years of Donald Trump, you're probably guaranteed a Democrat in 4 more years, because Trump can only do 1 term. And you can nurture your bench. You can bring up some strong candidates. You can have the people who should be running now running then if you're a Democrat. You can do that. But you're conceding that the Supreme Court is going to get more stacked. You're conceding that more and more laws are going to move in ways that are almost irreversible. You're going to concede potentially that if there is a natural disaster or a national disaster like COVID, that people will die more than they need to. There's absolutely no way to defend Joe Biden as an effective leader, or as a progressive leader, or as a justice-oriented leader in the radical sense or in the left-wing sense. Joe Biden is a centrist. He fakes left and he goes right. At best, he's a centrist Democrat, but in foreign policy, he's awful hawkish. He wants more police. He wants more, we could go down a list of things wrong with Joe Biden. That's not the point tonight. The point is that no matter how bad Joe Biden is, I promise you Donald Trump is worse. I can't pretend that he's not. Donald Trump is a much worse outcome for the most vulnerable people in the world. Not for me. Maybe not for you watching. Maybe not. But for a whole lot of vulnerable people, for a whole lot of women who want reproductive justice, for a whole lot of people who need affirmative action, for a whole bunch of people who want citizenship, Donald Trump is a much worse alternative. So if you are a Democrat or you're somebody who just wants Trump out, you need a real alternative. And Joe Biden gives people permission to hold on to the status quo. And then you wonder why people choose Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz and Robert F. Kennedy and Jill Stein. Because they keep watching the same old candidates pop up, underperform, disappoint us, and then tell us, well, you ain't got no choice. So if you want Trump not to be president, you got to sell low on Biden. I know you want to wait for him to go out on a high horse. You want him to you exit with pomp and circumstance. You want him to be the kind of Democrat version of Reagan, the elder statesman that coasts out and then brings in a George H.W. Bush to have a virtual third term. Ain't gonna happen. Biden is at a low. His approval ratings aren't good. The eye test, he's failing. He embarrassed himself last night. It's time for Biden to go right now. If I'm a Democratic strategist, if I'm a Democratic power broker, I'm whispering to Joe right now, it's time that you step aside. And you step aside, not saying you can't win, you step aside with a health issue. You say you're sick. Say something came up. Say you believe there's somebody else who can run this country. Put your full-throated endorsement behind somebody else. You gotta do something. Because this ain't it. It's time, Democrats, for you to sell low on Biden. I know you want to sell high, but you gotta sell low. But people are going to say, well, what do you do? Well, you have an open convention and you let the chips fall where they may. Or everybody has to get behind a single candidate. Now, that's not easy. That's nowhere near easy. Kamala Harris is the vice president. It's going to be very difficult to tell people that there's a better option than Kamala Harris. If you chose Kamala Harris as your vice president, and you said that she could step in and be president at any moment and do an extraordinary job and keep everything moving consistently, then how the heck can you now move her out of the way and bring in somebody else? So Kamala Harris is your first choice. Here's the problem. Kamala Harris, and I like Kamala Harris as a person. I don't agree with her ideologically, but I don't agree with her any more or less than I do Joe Biden. I think they both have the same problematic politics. But that ain't even my point right now. I'm saying she can't beat Donald Trump. I don't see anybody in this election cycle but a white man beating Donald Trump. Could be a progressive white man. Could be a disappointing white man. But there's the slice of people who still think Donald Trump is a legitimate option. They're probably not voting for Kamala Harris. But I'll get beyond that. There are black men who are polling low on Kamala Harris. And it's not Kamala's fault. Vice President Kamala Harris is no more or less capable than any other vice president we've seen. She is not weak. She is not unintelligent. She is quite intelligent, quite smart, quite experienced. But there's a lot of patriarchy. There's a lot of hate out there in the world. There's a lot of anti-black hate. There's a lot of anti-woman hate. And when those two things converge, it gets tough. And so people are often holding Kamala Harris to a different standard. But whatever the reason, let's get beyond that. Look at the numbers. The numbers don't show her doing well. Let's get beyond our current numbers. When she was running for president, which is different than being vice president, she didn't poll well. She didn't do as well as Pete Buttigieg. So what does that mean? It means that there's a really good chance that voters aren't going to get behind Kamala Harris. They might just decide to let the Donald ride out another 4 years. It's not 8, it's only 4. They may say we can handle that. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it might just have to be what it is. Whew. Then there's Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is an interesting choice. He's the one everyone's grooming for the next time around. Gavin Newsom keeps saying he's not the presidential candidate. He doesn't want to be a presidential candidate. He doesn't want to be a presidential nominee. He doesn't want to be any of those things. Gavin Newsom keeps saying that he is just supporting the Biden-Harris ticket. And he's saying, again, he says Kamala Harris is next up. He has said that before. He has to say that. You know why? Because even though Kamala Harris can't win, if anybody perceives that Kamala Harris has been moved aside, if anybody perceives that these white men have jumped the line and taken Kamala Harris the vice president's spot, you know what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Black voters are going to be pissed and they won't get behind Gavin Newsom and they may never forgive him or whoever else runs. So you can't go around Kamala Harris and you can't choose her. Now, the next time around, Gavin Newsom will be the person. I guarantee it won't be Kamala Harris, it'll be Gavin Newsom. But what do you do? There's also, by the way, Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro governor of Pennsylvania, interesting choice. I'm not sure that he has the experience and the timing right now to do it, but in 4 to 8 years, he could also be a vice presidential or presidential possibility. But again, can't go around Kamala Harris. You can't get a black man like Wes Moore to go around Kamala Harris because it creates an internal strife. And I'm not making this the Kamala Harris dilemma. I'm simply saying that black voters are loyal, and other voters are racist and sexist sometimes. So we have to, we got to do what we got to do. We got to do what we got to do. So we got to figure something out. So what does that look like ultimately? To sell low on Biden then means that not only does Biden have to step aside, but the Democratic Party has to agree on who the person is, and there can be no competition for this spot. That means Kamala Harris has to step aside and say, I will support Gavin Newsom or Josh Shapiro and be their VP for a term, or Gavin Newsom has to say, I will be Kamala Harris's VP, and they have to let the chips fall where they may. But you can't win with Biden. If you know you can't win with Biden, even Kamala Harris, who is not, I think, the strongest option, is still a better option perhaps than Joe Biden right now. But whatever you do, Democrats, you got to do something. Because if you keep holding pat and you keep saying, oh, we'll come back around, the gap is going to get wider, and we're all going to lose this country. All right, family, welcome back to Night School. Please tell me what the blank is a black job. Last night, during the presidential debate, there was a very interesting and intense at times debate or disagreement between Donald Trump and Joe Biden about this idea of a black job. Donald Trump, because you know Donald Trump is going to say what he's going to say, he was basically telling black people, as he has before, that I'm your guy because I keep the immigrants out, and the immigrants that are out are making your life better. The immigrants being out makes your life better, right? He said they're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history. Now, you know, the first thing everybody said, and I was one of the people that said it too, I said, what the hell is a black job? If I were to read this in the worst possible light, and I wish Joe Biden had pushed back on this, but he didn't. That's not his racial logic or his calculus or his analysis either. If I read this in the worst possible light, he's saying that all the low income jobs are really black jobs. You know, we see this in every country around the world, right? That there are jobs that we say are for Arabs. There are jobs we say are for Yazidis. There are jobs we say are for Romanis. There's jobs we say are for blacks. There's jobs we said are for Jews. There's blacks we've said are for Irish. And it always means that the worst jobs in our society, we literally say are jobs that are best served or best filled by these people who have been racialized and marginalized in society. So saying a black job is not a good thing. And you know, a lot of people responded because they were like, yo, this is not okay. When you say this is a black job, what are you saying about me, right? Like, for example, Keisha Lance Bottoms, you know, former mayor of Atlanta, says, I have a law degree. Does that get me a black job, right? Because again, the idea was like, what is a black job? And of course, you know, people had jokes, these are, you know, and I don't want to get into the jokey part of it because Twitter, you know, they nailed it, right? But, you know, you got people like DeLon Diller said the moderators are not pressing them enough for me. I understand we only have 90 minutes, but there's certainly a few things that could have been clarified or challenged, including a black job. That's right. I would have said, Mr. Trump, and you too, Mr. Biden, what the hell is a black job? Because it sounds like you're saying the shittiest jobs in society should be associated with black and Hispanic people. That is my worst case read. Now, I don't think that's what Trump was trying to communicate, even if that's what he thinks in the back of his mind. I think I would bet my last dollar that's what he thinks in his mind. But what he's trying to say, what he's probably trying to say is that Black people are overrepresented. He can't use words like overrepresented, but that Black people are overrepresented in certain jobs, low skill, low wage jobs, that they're overrepresented in home health care, that they're overrepresented in government, that they're overrepresented in all these areas. And that if you bring Mexicans in, that's all he's really talking about, that they're going to, take those, that they're taking the low wage jobs. And basically the Mexicans are taking your jobs, Black people. So me building a wall, me having draconian immigration policy, that is for your benefit, Black people, because I'm saving the Black jobs. That's a generous interpretation. And you know what? I'm willing to be generous, not because I like Donald Trump, but because I think he believes that. Or more importantly, I think some of y'all believe that. And I think it's important to push back against that logic. The truth is, the data contradicts what not only what Trump is saying, but what a lot of Black people I hear saying when I hear xenophobic narratives coming from them. Oh, I don't want these Mexicans taking my job. The unemployment rate right now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I know under the Roberts Code, we don't like data in organizations that produce expertise from the government, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that right now, for US-born citizens of all races, unemployment is at 3.8. It's an all-time low. That's lower than the overall unemployment rate. Black unemployment is also low. So Mexicans aren't taking your job because we're not looking for jobs. There's not a whole lot of Black people who need jobs, right? Now let's go to the other point, right? He's saying, but the jobs they do take are your jobs, Black people. So you will be more unemployed. That's not true. People who come to this country as newly arrived immigrants, they go into construction, they go into agriculture, they go into food service. Those aren't jobs that Black people have that say Mexicans are taking or Guatemalans are taking. These are jobs that go unfilled if the new immigrants don't take them. So they're not taking Black jobs. They're taking jobs that nobody's taking. They're taking jobs that nobody kind of wants right now. Nobody's taking. I don't say they don't want them. They ain't taking. So our labor market right now is absorbing immigrants easily. It's creating jobs for people who are already here. And the people who would be most impacted by immigration are just fine. So so even if you believe that Donald Trump is operating in good faith and he was just trying to look out for the Black people who lose their job to the immigrant, or the white guy who's losing his job to the immigrant, it's not true. It's a myth. It's a farce. It's part of Trump's fascist tactics. His fascist political campaign, his fascist ideology, his fascist rhetoric is to always take somebody who's economically vulnerable, the poor white guy in the Midwest, for example, and tell him that the reason that he can no longer work in the factory and put his kid through college, the reason that he can't afford the mortgage on his house as interest rates go up, the reason why he's not as successful as his father was even 20, 30 years ago, it's not because of capitalism. It's not because of the billionaire class that Donald Trump occupies or pretends to occupy. It's not because of the hoarding of wealth of the 1%. It's not the neoliberalism's commitment to kind of globalizing capital and privatizing everything. No, it's none of that. It's the Mexican. They're taking your jobs. They're your enemy. Black man, vote for me, because these white liberals don't understand Black suffering and pain like I do as Donald Trump. Can you believe that? The billionaire represents the everyman. That's classic fascist BS, but it works. And so the idea of Black jobs is not just a dig at Black people and longstanding historical narratives about what Black labor is supposed to look like. Read Blair Kelly's book, Black Folk. It's amazing, and it gets at all of this. But also, it's a divisive tactic used to stop Black and brown people and to stop the working class, to stop the proletariat from building a movement that will overturn the current economic mode of production and produce the kind of liberatory solidarity that we need. So ain't no such thing as Black jobs. It's BS. Don't accept that as a narrative, and don't accept his solution as legitimate. All right, y'all, we got one more topic before we go. On Night School, stay right here. All right, family, welcome back to Night School. I got one more topic I got to talk to y'all about. This. You know, I have been a basketball fan for a very long time, my entire life. There are a few things I watch more about. There are a few things that I watch more, and there are a few things that I care more about than basketball, and that's just a fact. There are a few things I know more about than basketball, ironically, although I tend to talk about politics. So when I make the statement that I'm about to make, I don't want you to think that I am being hyperbolic. I don't want you to think that I'm being dramatic. I don't want you to think that I am being, extra for the purpose of getting clicks. I'm not. When Bronny James, you know what? Let me start over. I want to establish context, and I want also, Princess, so if you cut this up later, you can say I did. Last night, the Los Angeles Lakers drafted Bronny James, the son of NBA superstar LeBron James, with their final pick in the NBA draft at number 55. The move was not particularly surprising, as there have been rumors and arguments and damn near promises that if LeBron James stays in LA, Bronny gonna be able to play with him. And as soon as the pick was made and everybody cried and hugged and celebrated, this became a very polarizing conversation. Some people talked about legacy. They talked about the beauty of LeBron James extending his legacy. They talked about the power and the possibility of having the James legacy continue through his son. I hear all of that. But usually I get emotionally connected. I get excited. I almost have a tear dripping down my eye when I see those kind of beautiful moments. Dell Curry and Steph Curry. You know what I mean? Brent Barry and Rick Barry, whatever, right? But this time I did not. I was frustrated and disappointed that this happened. I saw it coming. I'm not surprised by it, but I was still disappointed. And I'll tell you why. This was one of the most egregious cases of nepotism that I have seen in my life. In sports, among players. I'm gonna say that again. And I need to be very specific with my language. This is one of the most egregious cases of nepotism in sports among athletes, among players that I've ever seen. In fact, it is the most egregious example that I have ever seen. And I'll tell you why. Bronny James, at this stage, at this moment in his life, does not belong in the NBA. Could he belong in the NBA in a year, 2, 3? Absolutely. He's a great kid, McDonald's All-American, played, great skill set, very athletic. What I see in him is an elite defensive player in the making. But I don't see a playmaker yet. I don't see somebody who drives well with both hands. I see him going left better than right. He's somebody who didn't fill the bucket or didn't shoot well in college. He averaged 5 points a game in college, 4.8 to be exact. There is nobody who averages 4.8 points a game in college that, in general, that does not need to stay in college a little bit longer. I think if you talk to any NBA player, and I've talked to lots of them about this, there is not a single NBA player who believes that Bronny James right now belongs in the NBA. There are people who are cool with the choice, but they don't believe he belongs in the NBA. They believe that they know that he's on this roster because of his dad. Now, a lot of people, I saw Kendrick Perkins, I saw Jay Williams, I saw Stephen A. Smith, all say, well, there's plenty of nepotism in the NBA. They're correct. Luke Walton would not have been coaching if not for Bill Walton. You know, it's a fact, right? If you look in the NFL or the NBA or you know, I don't know hockey as well, but in the other two sports, you see the sons of people. Look at Jerry Jones and his whole family. Or look in politics. Look at the whole Trump administration being run by his kids. Jared Kushner has been running Middle East policy, and he don't know anything about the Middle East. Except he said he read a couple books. Nepotism is everywhere. Nepotism is usually wielded by white people. It's usually wielded by the wealthy. It's usually wielded by the 1%. It's usually wielded by people who don't look like LeBron and Bronny James. I get that. But we have to get out of the mindset of saying that our freedom dream is to be as unaccountable and unprincipled as white men. That is not the world that we want to live in. Now, it's the 55th pick in the draft. It's almost a symbolic pick if you want it to be, right? Most second-round draft picks don't make the team anyway. But Bronny is going to make the team. He is going to have a spot. Ain't no way they're going to draft him and cut him. So if that's the case, what's the harm, Mark? There's always a 15th guy on the bench that don't play or gets a two-way deal. From what I understand, according to rumor reports, I can't confirm this, he won't take a two-way deal. But even if he does, right? Bronny James is not an NBA player right now. Putting him on the end of a bench, people say, well, other people on the end of the bench that can't play. Look at Giannis's brother. That's nepotism. True. Thanasis Antetokounmpo does not belong in the NBA either. But I would make sense a little different. He got drafted by the Knicks. He played in the G League. He put some time in. He didn't get drafted straight by the Bucks, which I think makes it even more egregious. But we make fun of Thanasis. Thanasis is literally the punchline. He is the metaphor. He is the stand-in when people talk about somebody who don't deserve it. He's a meme. I don't want Bronny James to be a meme. Bronny James is smart. He's well-mannered. He's polite. He's careful. He's honest. He's humble. He seems like a beautiful kid, a well-raised kid. Shout out to LeBron and Savannah for that. I don't want him to be part of a circus. And I don't want him to only be on a team to fulfill a corporate branding thing or to fulfill LeBron's legacy. I don't think LeBron has bad intentions. I think LeBron's a beautiful dude too. But I think as a father, as a parent, we can sometimes want this legacy thing that becomes about our ego. It becomes about our story and not our kids' story. I'm glad Dwayne Wade didn't force Zaire onto a roster. Zaire needs to be doing what he's doing right now, which is travel, play in other leagues, develop, grow, and maybe one day he'll make the league on his own, right? I like that left-hand J you got. I think Bronny James is a pro one day, but you don't want to stun his growth. You don't want to undermine his reputation. Now you'll say, well, there's no college team you can play for that will be better than getting trained by LeBron James and playing on the Lakers for the next 2 or 3 years. That's true. He will grow a lot in practice. He will grow a lot by working out with these elite players. But that's only part of it. He could do that at USC. He's at USC. He could work out with them anyway. What he's going to experience now is an attack on his reputation. He's going to be a punchline. Players aren't going to respect him. Teammates may not respect him. I don't think it's best for him. And I don't think it's best for the league. I don't want a league, because this is up to the fans too. As a fan, I want my team to put the best roster up they can. And the best roster ain't Bronny James right now if I'm a Lakers fan. I'm not a Lakers fan. But if I were a Sixers fan, I'd be through the roof right now. Because the Lakers actually need help. The Lakers actually need roster spots. The Lakers actually need to develop. They shouldn't be putting energy here. They should be putting energy in getting players that will make LeBron James get another championship. That should be the legacy that we should be thinking about. And as a fan, that's what I want to see. This isn't about ego. It shouldn't be. It should be about winning. And so when I say he's the first Nepo baby player, I'm not ignoring that nepotism is all through the front office, all through the corporate part of it. And you know what? I want Black people in them jobs. If you want to put Black people in corporate America, leading or Black people in the administration, Black people in the executive branch of not branch, but in the executive suite or the C-suite of these companies, I'm down with that. I want Bob Johnson or Michael Jordan to bring their kids in and have them run the team. I love that. I don't think it's anything wrong with having a family business that you bring your family in. To me, that's not even nepotism. But if it is, I'm cool with that. But what I'm not cool with is putting a kid in a position that he may not be able to live up to, that will undermine his long-term growth and maturity and development, and maybe even hurt LeBron's legacy in the long. Anyway, just my thoughts. All right, family, thank you for watching Night School. As always, it is a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to be with y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit all them buttons. Like, subscribe, share, hit all of them, and hit the join button. Because when you do that, you help us expand our reach. You help us extend our content. You help us build the grassroots left-wing media outlet that we so desperately need in these trying times. So please, family, I want you to consider right now hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and again, hitting that join button so you can become a monthly subscriber to the channel. If you can't commit to a monthly thing, Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, right now, a payment just one time. We call it tuition. Think about dropping $10 right now for the month. If everybody watching right now would drop $10 for the month, we would meet our financial goals. We'd be able to invest in our studio, pay our personnel, advance our technology. We'd be able to do so much with your support. But if you don't have the money, that's okay too, fam. Keep watching, keep hitting like, keep sharing, and most importantly, keep learning, because that is the point of Night School. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.